If there is one single best practice that I would bring up to avoid what you mentioned, is definitely I would call it treat it as a C-level topic, see it as a C-level topic, involve your executives. Because whenever they're not really interested in it, they push it down and say like, come on, this is IT stuff and so on. So the CIO has to take care for it and the IT department. You get into several problems for several reasons. First thing is IT topics or IT departments in many cases are basically managed as a cost center. Yeah, and a cost center means like you have basically to deliver a certain service for the lowest amount of money, which means like their strategic focus is basically full on efficiency. Yeah, that's why they always want to have ROIs in that or business cases for many cases. And how do you calculate all these kind of TCOs? Yeah, you basically say like, I want to compare A with A, like continuing to do the same thing, but I want to have this cheaper or with maybe higher throughput. And this is efficiency, yeah, but this is not effectiveness. You're not able, if you approach a topic like this, to be innovative, to be able to do things you were not able to do before. But if you treat it as an business topic, and if you treat it as a C-level topic, you get certain topics, of course, that help you. For example, one of the most beautiful kickoffs I ever experienced was when a customer of mine, the CEO, was standing in front of, let's say, 150 people, key users, business users, and so on, and said very clear, like, listen, guys, within the next months, basically, you define how you will spend your time for 8 hours a day for 22 days a year for basically in the next 5 to 10 years. You should really treat it as that, and you should really take care for this, that you have your back by me. I will take care of that. I will back up what you are doing, and I will support what you're doing. But you as a team, you as a business area have to solve the topic. And this is, of course, a huge motivation also for them, for the business users, to involve themselves, to think innovation minded, and to bring the topic forward. Whenever you have C-level in there, which is I'm not so sure. Does it make us better? Can you tell it? Business area, come to me and tell me, are we really better if we do this? Never seen something which leads into digital excellence like that. Yeah, that does not help.
It's very interesting that you shared the story with the CEO, because I had a similar experience of one of my best experiences as well. And really then the entire C-level went there. And they also mentioned, some tail projects which really burned hundreds of millions of dollars, in the past. And obviously it's not the vendor issue. It's the same thing if you would blame cutting my fingers with a knife. Oh, it was sharp, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense either.
Absolutely.
But how can we bring it? How can we, let's say, make visible a value quickly in such huge transformations? Because I mean, obviously, we really do talk about transformation. We are both very passionate about it, but I think you would also agree, if you talk too much about transformation like AI, then it becomes a little bit inflationary. Suddenly the value itself of the word, loses its meaning. If you're, let's say, in a wider context with a wide anonymous audience, like we are on social media, for example, how can you make it maybe concrete, visible, shareable across the organization to also show what is the value, the impact, the effectiveness, as you mentioned?
I, to be honest, feel sorry for any new topic which comes up and then is grabbed by the LinkedIn marketing world in that case. Yeah, because suddenly everything is sustainable and suddenly everything is AI and so on. And this kind of dot washing is basically able to kill any topic at all before it started. And we've seen that in many cases, because to talk very frankly, like putting AI on legacy processes, what does it do? It's like polishing a turd. Sorry to say it like this, but it's really not helping anybody. Yeah, it's a topping. You have, of course, first lay out the baseline and so on, and then you can add these kinds of topics. And what, for example, most people also not do is like to start with that, to do really like a process observation or a process identification. Yeah, because at first, that's of course the first step that I always do with my customers. And what we are doing is separate the commodity from the differentiating processes. Why? Because at first the commodity processes have to be differently optimized like the differentiating processes, which is a very important thing. Yeah, because it does not help if you, for example, put RPA, which is doing really great things in the commodity world, onto differentiating processes like a cookie cutter onto everything. You will not get any value out of it. And also you will not convince anybody of the value you may get out of it if you do it like that. You really have to do the homework first. Okay, the most important thing definitely is to build that house from the bottom up. And very relevant in this case definitely is this kind of, like we said, differentiation between commodity and differentiating processes. The commodity processes you want to optimize differently. You want basically to optimize in that way that it's that they're running completely through without any interaction. You're focusing on efficiency in that way. Yeah, that's why also the reason you want to use RPA, for example, in there to do highly optimized automation. It just runs through without really touching it. And those processes, by the way, work out best also in public cloud environments. Yeah, like sales, like HR, and so on. You name it. Differentiating processes though are a little bit different, and they made, by the way, not so much of that whole cake. Most cases have just, let's say, 5 to 15% in your enterprise that make up really differentiating process in that way. And those processes are relevant that you want to optimize it for effectiveness, like for being able to do things you were not able to do before. And this means like new business models, ways to excite your customers and so on. And that's why you really have to be careful in the beginning that you approach it right, you approach it individually, and you do not try to come with cookie cutter wisdom and then put it on everything and say like, okay, this will work with you.
I think there's really a lot of interesting parts because we often are just scratching the surface. We talk about outcomes, we talk about cool stuff, new business models, innovation. But I think you just mentioned very nicely about the commodity processes and the differentiating processes. And there's also a little bit of a hidden Pareto here as well, right? Isn't it like you have a little bit of 10, 20%, but they really make the bulk, and
Absolutely.
vice versa when it comes to effort, outcome, and all the things. So yeah, Pareto still holds true. I'm happy to hear that.
If I may jump into that,
Sure.
it's very important what you say, because when I, for example, try to evangelize about innovation and about really putting the horsepower on the street, does this mean basically to throw everything away? No, of course not. It means, of course, that you can, by concentrating on 20% of your processes, get 80% of that value already. And that's why it is so relevant not to stumble into a project, but to really sit together in the beginning and discuss about the right approach, to make a pre-study, to make a clear roadmap, how I want to set this up and how I want to really make this happen and so on. And by this, I'm not only getting a better picture, which helps then, of course, the executive to get there, basically get them involved and get their support and so on, and spearheading that kind of in initiative. But it also backs up, of course, your value generation, because in the beginning already you know what comes out in the end. You can use this to sell basically this kind of idea initiative to your stakeholders and your end users in the end. And one example for how we did this in the past was with one customer, for example, with an expo, yeah, where they had on their company day, they had kind of, let's say, exhibition about the way of working tomorrow, like showing them IoT cases, like showing them a test system where they could look into Fiori apps and so on and see basically how they work in the future, or how the future will look like for them. And this, of course, was helping to get rid of many of these kinds of anxieties, and was already the first step in successful change management in that case.
I mean, you know, I could talk with you like for hours on
And we
all of
should
these topics,
probably.
and really maybe another day, but maybe not today. But there's actually one key takeaway I do today. You know, there's the good, the bad, the ugly, but independent of the situation, we can always learn from that. And we see that alignment to strategy, don't treat it as a just migration option, but at the same time, don't push it as a IT topic.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up and come towards a close. And don't get me wrong, I think it's really, really important to underline these topics, but they are not, let's say, quotes on quotes, necessarily new. We actually have been dealing with these for quite some time already. Probably some books already mentioned these things. But in your work, you also mentioned, start the process, discovery, understand and listen. How can we here at the SAP Signavio actually support these topics? Can you maybe share how we can bring these things together, which you mentioned earlier here?
I agree with you that this is actually not new. And also, if you would condense it into one sentence, and the one sentence of wisdom is that basically, like, you will not get a digital transformed superstar if you just buy a subscription. This alone does not help. Yeah, of course, innovation wants anybody, but do you also really want to walk the walk and feel the pain? Because it's sometimes exactly like this. You have to invest, and invest does not mean only money, of course, in a certain way, but also change. Change is also an investment. And I think the best thing that we all could do is really to align on that we have to approach these topics that way. And Signavio is, from my perspective, one of the absolute key topics in there to deliver this kind of innovation. Because when we talk about capabilities, and LeanIX, for example, is a very competent starting point, which is beautifully integrating into SAP Signavio, which then does the next steps for this kind of capability implementation. This is something which really helps. And I think the most important thing is that the SAP ecosystem learns to speak there with one voice and being very clear about we have to get the value to the street by not just throwing around marketing buzzwords, but really be clear about what it matters, what kind of invest has to be done, and what are the relevant tools and the relevant best practices to really get the horsepower to the street.
Thanks with that. And maybe just to add one sentence, and of course, that SAP ecosystem includes partners like you, which we are also very, very thankful to have, because we can make the best software there is if we don't have customers and partners alike working together to driving the business outcomes, then we would be just a simple technology company. And I think to drive business outcomes, that's what we are. Well, Alex, really, thanks so much for being here today. I enjoyed that very much. And I wish you all the best. And until the next time, thanks.
Looking forward. Bye.